the idea of anything remotely to do with just not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow is just the most appealing thing ever. At least that was my experience anyway. When I was 19, all I wanted to do was just go to take as many photos there and charge to the next place, then charge to the next place. And I wasn't even thinking about tomorrow or like even in the afternoon, you know, it was just literally each moment as it came, which was such an amazing time of life to go through. But as I started to get a little older, I started to realize long term in terms of like what I wanted to achieve as a person and who I wanted to be, and the following that I'd built up on social media, I realized like I had a real opportunity to influence a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to influence young people in the way that I was influencing them. And so I started to really look internally, like, who am I and what do I want out of life? And that's when I started to realize, like, there's a lot of things in my life that I was missing that perhaps were making me feel a little unease.
Welcome to More Than Money with your host, Ross Marais. This episode of More Than Money is brought to you by More Time Financial, a financial planning company who are on a mission to help young Australians make smarter decisions with money by providing real-life financial advice, coaching, and financial education.
Hey, what's up? It's Ross Marais. Welcome back to another episode of More Than Money. On this podcast, I have real conversations about lifestyle, money, and business. Sometimes I share interviews with business owners and entrepreneurs about starting their own business and their journey. Other times we do financial education and informational episodes to help you make smarter decisions with money, just like this one. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. Now, before we get started on today's episode, this is just a friendly reminder in order to keep our lawyers happy that in preparing this podcast, myself and any contributors have not taken into account any particular person's objectives, financial situation, or needs. So before acting on any of this information, you should consider its relevance to your personal circumstances, and if required, seek the assistance of a licensed professional. Welcome back to another episode of the Young Money Podcast with your host, Ross Marais. In today's episode, I share with you a chat that I had with a friend of mine, Elliot Lyons. Elliot is a social media influencer, content creator, and aspiring triathlete. Elliot has spent the last 4 years traveling the world with his best mates under the alias of the Neverland Boys. In this episode, Elliot discusses the ups and downs of social media, building a business and being in partnership with your best friends, and how traveling the world and being paid to create content online left him feeling unfulfilled. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If we want to maybe kick things off, give us who is Elliot Lyons.
Elliot Lyons. Well, if you asked me that a few years ago, probably would have told you that I was just a sports fanatic and knew nothing else about life. But as time's progressed throughout the transition from like kind of late teens to early 20s, discovered that I was actually really creatively driven. And so now I would say that I'm a bit of a artsy mix of both, with sporting endeavours and creative aspirations as well. Yep. And kind of finding my feet with blending them both together and trying to make a life out of both.
And what's happened over the last maybe 3 or 4 years that's kind of brought you to where you are now?
So about 18, I dropped uni and went to England to play cricket, thinking that was all I was going to do with life, just chase summers playing cricket in Australia and England, and picked up a shoulder injury that kind of was the end of the cricketing dream. And when I came back to Australia at the end of the summer in England, I was a bit lost, didn't know what to do, and was finding it kind of a bit depressing being around the cricket scene and not being able to join in. So I moved to an island off the coast of WA called Rottnest.
Okay.
And it was just a playground for bigger kids. And I was like, oh, this is what people do if they're not playing cricket. And never looked back, really, just kind of lived for a while there, just surfing and freediving, hanging out at the beach with all like-minded people, and then kind of realised that there was an opportunity to start documenting it. Like, I'd never really taken a photo before, but I thought maybe taking some photos of it could be cool.
Was that something that you'd seen other people doing, or was that something that you just kind of thought about?
Yeah, no, not really. There was a guy there that was right into it, and he was just taking his camera around everywhere, and I was like, oh, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I just kind of learnt the ropes from him, and it went from there. And I always kind of just had little ideas about different things, and as I got more and more into it, I kind of thought that it could be cool to document life there. And it just felt like a place where time didn't exist. Like just age seemed to be like non-existent there. Everyone that was hanging out just felt like the same age. And so I kind of resonated with the Neverland kind of vibe from Peter Pan. Yeah. And had a few mates coming over for the summer and thought that maybe we could document the summer together. So put together a little collective of us boys. There was 4 of us at the time. Yeah. And we formed a little brand called the Neverland Boys. And, just got a bit of attention straight away on social media, and things took off. It was kind of early days of travel blogging on Instagram, I guess, and a couple of crazy opportunities presented itself. And was that an idea to be like, all right, let's see what we can do and make this cool content and put it out in the world? Or was it kind of more internal, like, let's just do it for ourselves, this would be cool? Well, you can kind of see when you look back at the content now that how raw it is. Like, although we were really driven to just make it whatever it could be, the content was just so pure. Like, the camera and the photos was almost secondary to living it. Yeah. So it was just so organic. Like, we weren't faking anything. It was genuinely our everyday life. And as time progressed, it just became more and more about getting the content and less about living it, which is, I guess, the transition from it just being a lifestyle to it being work. Yeah. Which was an interesting kind of phase to go through and a huge learning curve as well.
Yeah. And was it like, did you set out with the intention of like, all right, let's make a living from this? Or was it, let's just live our lives and have fun and show people what we're doing?
Yeah, well, we were living on Rottnest, and the way that it works there is you can only live there if you work there. Yeah, so we were all working like 4 days for 10 hours, and then we had 3 days off. Yeah. So the 3 days off, we were just living it up. And our idea was like, if we can just do this every single day and not have to do the 4 days of work, then that'd just be so ideal. And at first, we were just kind of stoked with getting a free pair of board shorts for photos. Yeah. But soon the work kind of became a bit more in demand and money started coming and we didn't have to work. So I guess we weren't thinking of the full potential of what it was. We were purely just living it for ourselves. But the moment that when we realized that what we were doing was actually an opportunity to turn it into a kind of career, I guess. Yeah. Was when our minds switched and we were like, oh, this could actually be full-time work. And that's when we kind of transitioned into more of like a work mindset, I guess. Okay. Yeah.
And was that it would have been an interesting challenge to go from, all right, we're having fun and now it's work? Like, yeah. Was it hard to kind of separate it, or did it kind of blur in together?
It was a real interesting time because it went so quickly from purely just documenting for ourselves and for our own brand into documenting for the purpose of other people's brands that thought that their brand aligned with ours. Yeah. And I guess like that transition, although we weren't consciously thinking about what was going on, it was what was happening was we were doing more and more work for other people and less work for ourselves. And I think about the 12-month mark, we realized that we didn't have any time for our own projects and we were purely just outsourcing our work all the time. And all of us together were just kind of a bit creatively, what's the word? Like a bit distressed, I guess, like just felt strained because there's a lot of like restrictions on the creative concept and the creative direction of a project when it's for someone else. And so for the second half of the kind of endeavor, I guess, we were just more about producing for ourselves and less about outsourcing our work to other people. Yeah.
Now, we had our mutual friend Cole Hunter on the show a couple episodes ago, and he kind of introduced, I guess, the listeners and opened my eyes up into the world of being an online travel blogger and being a travel photographer and being an Instagrammer. So do you want to maybe dive into that a little bit in terms of what your experience was around that and how you found that world?
Well, I can honestly say that it's a bit of a surreal experience to get paid to travel, as I'm sure Kyle probably told you last week.
Yeah.
But when you first start, like I remember my first trip traveling and thinking like, I just don't want to get on the return flight home. And the idea of just a never-ending holiday just seems so appealing. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what it is. It's just like life in between countries is just your day-to-day. Like you'll fly here and you're there for a few days, but then you're going to another country after that, which is just a pretty humbling position to be in. And spending all your money on future trips and then getting paid to be there and then spending that money on the next trip. Yeah. It's just a continuous cycle. And there's some incredible people in the industry like Kyle. That's how we met Kyle, through the travel photography. And he's one of my closest mates now. But I guess after time, I realized that it wasn't my dream. Like it wasn't making me feel fulfilled. And I really struggled with how that came off, because it's really hard to document your life when your life is just continuous travel, and the everyday user of Instagram is documenting their life. And so there's just an automatic comparison that goes on between people that are consuming your content and the person that's putting it out. And I really struggled with that, and it didn't really sit well with me after time. Not to down talk it or anything like that. It was just an incredible time of my life. But long term, I needed something that was going to make me feel more fulfilled. And I think that was the start of me realizing that it wasn't my dream job and it wasn't fully a representation of who I am as a person, which was lucky for me to realize at like 23. But I'm still really grateful for all the opportunities.
So when did you start traveling? So you're 23 now. When did this all kind of kick off for you?
Yeah, so I think I was 19 and we collaborated with a couple of social media influencers, and our first trip got offered and it was a free trip to Hawaii. And I think I'd just turned 20. Yeah. Because I remember it was my 20th birthday and like the birthday present was going to Hawaii. So that was like over 3 years ago now. Yeah. But another really interesting thing that I think it could be cool to touch on, because I'm not sure if Kyle spoke about it, but I remember the excitement that I had for that first trip. I bet. And the idea that I was going for free, and I was just going there to use my skills in exchange for the free trip. Yeah. And the excitement that I had then, I never quite fully experienced again, which was a really interesting feeling to experience, because that was the experience I had when I went on holiday. Like I was like, oh, going to Bali in like 2 weeks or whatever. But when I started getting into it and it was like, we're going to Hawaii, then we're going to Greece, then we're going to, wherever else, that excitement for each trip kind of like dropped off. And I don't know if that was me already realizing that I needed to be doing something else, or if that was just a transition into like the life of living on the road, I guess.
Do you think because it started to become work?
Yeah.
Do you think that was maybe...
Because this is just the constant tug of war that I had in my head the whole time. Yeah. Because it was a lot of, like when I was talking to my mates, whatever, it was always like, oh, he's on holiday again. Yeah. But it wasn't a holiday, because we'd like wake up, shoot photos all day, have to get a certain amount of content for each brand, and then we needed our own stuff as well, and then you come home and edit all night. And like for a lot of people, that is just the dream, but it just really became tiring. Like that's every single day. So it is almost a job, I guess. Like even though you love your job, you never work a day in your life, but doing that every single day just started to really tie me down, like I guess any job does. Yeah. And so then my outlet for like a holiday was like coming home and just spending a few low-key days at home.
It's complete opposite to everyone.
Yeah, just like the opposite way around. Yeah. I hope that doesn't come off the wrong way. Like I absolutely loved what I did, but I really wanted, I almost wanted the people that were seeing the photos to experience what I was experiencing as well, rather than just give them a taste of like one photo, which is, 1/2 of a second of my day. Yeah.
You started when you're 19. So 3 or 4, 5 years. Like when was that point when you're like, okay, this isn't for me? Like when did that kind of happen?
Yeah. I guess when you're 19, the idea of anything remotely to do with just not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow is just the most appealing thing ever. At least that was my experience anyway. When I was 19, all I wanted to do was just go to take as many photos there and charge to the next place, then charge to the next place. And I wasn't even thinking about tomorrow or like even in the afternoon, you know, it was just literally each moment as it came, which was such an amazing time of life to go through. But as I started to get a little older, I started to realize long term in terms of like what I wanted to achieve as a person and who I wanted to be. And the following that I'd built up on social media, I realized like I had a real opportunity to influence a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to influence young people in the way that I was influencing them. And so I started to really look internally, like, who am I and what do I want out of life? And that's when I started to realize, like, there's a lot of things in my life that I was missing that perhaps were making me feel a little unease.
Yeah.
And that was only recently, like in the last kind of 8 months. And I guess this is probably a perfect transition into, like, talking about working with your mates, because I was traveling with my best mates, but I didn't want to travel anymore. I wanted to get into fitness and health and live a really healthy lifestyle. But I was in a business with my two best mates who absolutely loved constantly traveling, and they kind of relied on my position in the team. So I guess only like 8 months ago, I kind of transitioned into more of a healthy lifestyle and set some goals with what I want to achieve and how I want to take my direction and my influence over the next few years.
Yeah. So if we jump back into the building the business with your friends, like, so that was the Neverland Boys. That was the business.
Yeah.
And then you each had like your own accounts as well. Like,
yeah.
And did you earn money through your individual efforts as well?
Yeah.
Or was it always a collaborative?
So we started purely as any of your mates do. Oh, that'd be a sweet idea. Let's do that. So everyone jumped on board, and we had no thought with regards to like forming a business officially until a bit further down the track, which proved to be a pretty naive decision. But as time progressed and Neverland got more attention, we kind of realised that just the one form of revenue through Neverland Boys between four of us at the time probably wasn't going to supply us with enough income to make it something that was sustainable. So there was an opportunity there to build our personal brand, I guess, which is what we started to do.
Yeah.
So we would do like group projects through Neverland. And then while we were there, we would like tee up our own kind of campaigns that we could use each other to shoot to monetize our own profiles as well.
Okay. And just like what type of stuff were you doing? So clothing brands, like travel companies, like what, just to give an idea of.
Yeah. So an example trip would be the first trip that we actually got to Hawaii, that was with Sony for their action camera.
Okay.
And we just built the relationship up with them over time to a point where we could kind of pitch a trip to them, and then they would either say yes or no. So an example trip would be like we went to Greece and shot an action cam video there. But while we were there, personally, I was shooting a little campaign for a watch brand, a coconut water brand, and we also made a video for a bar there, Lost Boys Bar.
Okay.
So we were there for a month and had like 4 projects on the go.
And was that like, were you pretty intentful about that? So, right, we're going for a month, let's see what we can lock in before we get there. Be like, right, brand 1, 2, 3, 4, like, and try and maximize that trip. Like,
yeah, I guess like probably the funnest part about it was so many of the times we literally had no money, because all the money that we had, we invested in a trip.
Yeah.
So Greece, for example, we got there, we're going to Greece, and we got there and we literally had nothing. We were on empty, so we were just hustling on the email. And one of the other bad things that was constantly happening was just late payments of invoices.
Yeah.
So we were like owed a certain amount of money, but we never knew when it was coming in. So I remember we turned up in Greece and we just slept on Kyle and Hayley's floor in their apartment while we hustled for jobs, and things obviously came through.
Yeah.
And we ended up spending like, I think 5 or 6 weeks there.
And that pitching for jobs, like, did you ever go in there and be like, nah, there's no chance they're going to take this? Like,
Yeah.
we're just taking the piss. Like,
Yeah. It always feels a bit crazy when you're putting a pitch together for a brand and it just sounds so perfect in terms of like you're just traveling and you're just going to go and spend a day on the boat and shoot some photos for a board short brand.
Yeah.
But when you actually realize that people or brands really value that content and that's what makes them money, like that's their oxygen, they need people like us sending it in, and that's when your mindset changes. Because initially I was like, yeah, what? Just give me the boardies for free, I'll get you some photos. But then when you're scrolling Instagram and you see like an ad pop up and it's your photo and that brand's monetizing the content that you provided them for free, you kind of realize that what you're providing them is valuable to them, which is a really interesting phase to go through, because just growing up as a consumer, you're just not even wired to think about where that content came from. Yeah. You just see it and you go, oh, sweet photo. Yeah, I'll buy those boardies. But when you're the one that's providing the content for them to market, then it's a really interesting kind of thought process to go through, because the content is so valuable and people do pay for it.
And was it hard to kind of put a value on yourself?
Oh, so hard, yeah. Especially coming in with no background. Like people be like, oh, how much for like 10 photos and 2 posts on Instagram? And just got absolutely no idea. So I felt a bit silly sometimes throwing a figure out there. Yeah. And you just like get no response or whatever. But on the opposite, you'll like give them something and they're like, oh, what? Yeah, and all about it. And then someone else is working for them as well. And then you find out that they've been paying them really good money and you just really underquoted them. So it's a bit of a like, I don't know, almost like a game, I guess.
Yeah. And was it all just trial and error? Like setting up the business, like having all these things going on? Was it just like 100%. On the fly? Like
yeah. But that was kind of what I wanted. Like I remember studying at university and learning about marketing.
What were you studying?
I was doing commerce. Yeah. So we started with a real general year.
Yeah.
And everything that I'm sure it got more specific as the degree progressed. But I remember sitting in a lecture and they were talking about like a management or a marketing strategy from like 50 years ago, and just thinking like, surely this is out of date. Why am I paying for this? And so I just Googled best marketers in the world and came across a few people that we've like spoken about, Gary Vee, Tim Ferriss, and they were just putting out content for free that was relevant. It was current and it was for free online. And so I just bought a whole bunch of books, dropped uni and just decided that I was going to just try and get practical with it. Yeah. And just had a few cracks at a couple of different businesses. Like I had a little tour business on Roto, had a little t-shirt brand that all failed. Yeah. And then Neverland, we just kind of hit gold, built a good team and had a good concept. And when it started to turn into a business, that's when things really got practical and just learnt so much about like earning money, pitching, selling yourself, marketing, producing content. Yeah. Like it was everything that I wanted to learn by going to university, but just in a more practical form.
Yeah. Oh, I think what you would have learned just even in like 6 months of doing that would have been more valuable than 5 years, 6 years at uni.
Yeah, well, that's what we were saying. Like I remember a couple of things happened throughout and we were like, oh, like you just can't read about this in a textbook or fully grasp what they're talking about if you did read it in a textbook, because when your future relies on it, then you're forced to like learn about it and I guess just get practical with how to break down the problems and get through them.
So what was some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome while having that business, working on the road, working with your mates?
Yeah, so there's so many challenges, constant battles with earning money and negotiating contracts, pitching where we wanted to go. But I think probably the biggest mistake we made was not forming the business properly, because about a year in we formed the brand and things were really starting to take off. We had a manager and there was a bit of a I guess a disagreement, but it felt really placid. Like it felt like we were all communicating really well.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, one of the guys in the group changed the passwords to all of our accounts, which was the livelihood of the business.
So the Instagram accounts?
Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, email, everything that we used as a pathway to getting more work and like telling our story was just gone.
So I think like to try and maybe make that a bit more real for some people that don't really understand, like that was your business. Like your Instagram page, that was your main source of income, like your followers.
100%. Everything that we had built was purely around building awareness on social media.
Yeah.
When we got locked out of everything, we kind of realized that what we had been building wasn't tangible.
Yeah.
And although it was a business of sorts, it wasn't an actual business that was running. And even if something like that happened, we couldn't continue to work.
Yeah.
Which was probably the biggest learning curve I learned throughout the whole time of the last few years, for sure. Just taking business seriously and taking business, not seriously, but formally, I guess is a better word, because you just never know what's going to happen. And that was just the biggest wake-up call.
So, like, just obviously disclose how much you want to hear, but you wake up in the morning, you go to log into your Instagram account and you can't get in? Like, was that kind of the...
Yeah, we just got back from a day out and had just got a notification that we were no longer admins and just couldn't get in contact with the other person. And for about a month or so, it was just in limbo, I guess. Like, we didn't really know the future of what we were doing. We didn't know how we were going to progress. We didn't know there were all these uncertainties that came up as a result of not having access to what we built up. And then I guess we just had two options. We could either like go to court and sort it out in the court, which was just beyond like our imagination. That's the last thing we wanted to do, and we thought the situation would lead to, or we could start again from scratch. And so that's what we did. We started everything from zero.
So to like give more idea around that, so just talk to me about numbers. So Instagram, like what were you kind of sitting at follower wise?
I think our Instagram had like close to 90,000. We had like nearly 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, and just a whole bunch of leads on 5,000 or 10,000 on Facebook, and just a whole bunch of leads and projects that were like in discussion over the email. And then trying to communicate that through our personal channels that we were having to restart without down talking anyone, without burning any bridges, without being anything other than ourselves. Like, it's not in our nature to be I guess disrespectful in a way and point fingers and point the blame on anyone. And so we had to restart in the most placid way that we could, and starting from zero when everything was really starting to take off was a big reality check, because the value of our work automatically just came down to purely providing the service, and being able to then provide awareness with the work that we'd produced was gone, which was a big part of our earnings, I guess. Yeah.
And how long did it take you to build up those numbers, like in terms of time frame?
Yeah, we still didn't get anywhere near it. Like,
no, but in terms of like from when you started.
Oh, okay. The first one.
Yeah, the first
Yeah, so I think we were about 10 or 11 months in to growing the first one when it happened. And we spent the next 14 months trying to regrow it. And by that time, Instagram and the travel space on social media just kind of exploded, and we were no longer an anomaly like we were that had kind of broken through.
Yeah.
We were just like another bunch of kids that were carrying their cameras around the world, which wasn't quite as appealing, I guess. So
I think like going back to the uni example, like going through that experience, learning everything you learn, and then having that happen and having to start all over again, like you cannot teach that. Like that is something that
crazy, man.
It's unbelievable.
It is so crazy. But even now, after everything that's kind of happened and having regrown it, there's still things that I would change if I restarted it now in terms of structure.
Yeah.
Just observing other businesses and people that are like-minded, I guess.
So some examples of that, like what?
So there's a brand called Salty Wings. They're good mates from WA, but they're like a couple years older than us, and the way that they went about starting the business and operating and creating streams of revenue and building their brand awareness, they just did so much better than we did.
Yeah.
And I think that was just us purely being young and naive, and just little things like we would only shoot content for Instagram instead of, while we're at places, shooting like a landscape photo in RAW that we could maybe sell on a shot as a print that people would buy, because obviously people don't want random photos of random people in their living room, but they might want a photo of a place that we went to.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. And there's so many ways to monetize a brand that we just didn't do. And there's so many things in terms of general marketing that we didn't do, in terms of like running campaigns on social media consistently and continually collaborating in projects that other influencers get involved with. There's just a gazillion different avenues that we could have explored that we just didn't, because we were so tunnel vision on just the next place, shoot photos for ourselves, go to the next place.
Yeah.
But I think that was just part of being young and stoked on just traveling.
And going through that whole experience, like having the account shut down and restarting, like, do you think it was a blessing in disguise?
Yeah.
Like looking back to where you are now? Like,
yeah. I just fully believe that everything happens for a reason, because had that not happened, I wouldn't have probably be where I am now in terms of my personal growth, and it would have been a lot harder to break away and do our own things had we continued on that path and continued to grow. Like the brand would have been so much more reliant on us. And also you just learn a lot about what you want in terms of life and the people you want around you. And had all these things not happen, then things would be so different to how they are now.
So what advice would you give to other people who, like, I'm sure there's thousands of people out there who want to do what you did? They want to be an Instagram influencer. They want to start a business with their friends. Like, what advice would you give? Regardless
of how well you think you know the person and how good of mates you are, I really think it's worth your while to have a contract in place or an agreement in place if there is a disagreement, because if you just mates with someone and hanging out with them, then it's a different relationship to how it is when there's money involved and business involved. So that'd be one. And I'd also really encourage people to set up the structure of the business properly so that the finances are right from the get-go and the money is divided effectively so that you're using the money in the right ways and you've got money for different kind of campaigns and it's all kind of official. But I guess in terms of making a living online, it's just purely self-driven.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason why anyone can't make a living online, because the opportunities and the different avenues that you can take to make a living are just so broad. So for example, on Instagram, if you want to be an Instagrammer, there's a gazillion people selling their presets, which is the colors that they use in their photos.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that use a certain preset get good interaction because those colors are appealing to an Instagram audience. So I'd find like a really appealing preset, buy that, learn the basics of how to edit on a YouTube tutorial, learn the basics of how to take a photo in terms of composition on a YouTube tutorial, and then just find a template with regards to pitching your ideas and where you want to go in the content to brands.
Yeah.
And you've got the tools right there. International travel awaits.
Yeah. Anyone can do it.
Yeah.
And just thinking more like around that, I guess the business side of things, what do you think, or like where do you see yourself going now down that avenue? Like, do you still want to go the online route, or you going more traditional jobs?
Nah, for sure. Like when I came back here, I did a little trial at a, I guess, traditional job, and just realised that it wasn't what made me feel like I was progressing. Like there's no worse feeling than waking up tomorrow feeling like you've gone backwards with life, and that's kind of how it made me feel. And I wasn't like an official job, it was like just working in hospitality.
Yeah.
Not to discount hospitality jobs because some people might like that, but with where I want to go, it's not helping me get to where I want to get to.
Yeah.
Which made me realise that I need to invest all my time and energy into continuing on the path that I've taken creatively and opportunities that arise with my presence online, and how I'm going to grow that and take that down the future, which is pretty exciting. Like I'm so excited to kind of blend what I've learnt with the creative stuff with passion for like health and fitness and triathlon. So I've got a few ideas, but just in the transition phase at the moment, I guess.
I think the hard bit for people is they have these ideas, but they just don't think it's possible. And I think obviously what you've gone through, you've proven that it is possible. You've seen it firsthand, like what you've been able to do and how much money you've been able to earn online and to fund your travel. For a lot of people, they sit there and they see it and it's like, nah, it's too good to be true. Like I couldn't do that. Like it's too hard, and they just don't see it firsthand. I think if there was some way you could show people to say, right, no, this is what you can do and this is what's possible. Like I did it, other people are doing it, and like get them out of that comfort zone and say, just like go for it. Like try and actually get out there and do what you want to do.
100%, man. It's so, I've kind of realised that even more now coming back and not having the Neverland aspects of my life with regards to the business and the money that came with it, and now getting to a point where I need to find other ways, like almost replacement income, I guess. It's just so all about being practical. Like everyone's got 1,000 ideas, but it's just all about how practical you are with making it happen.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that so much myself in terms of if you just have an idea and you just kind of dabble with it, nothing's going to come with it. You just got to go all in and just take the punt. And just things have a funny way of working out.
I think, like as you said, there's YouTube, there's like Google, like there's no reason why you can't learn anything you want to learn about it. Like,
I think with the exception of maybe, obviously medicine and a lawyer and I guess a teacher because you need the degree.
Yeah. There's
no value in terms of what you can't get on YouTube or Google that you can get at university other than the qualification. But in terms of knowledge, there's 1,001 tutorials on anything that you want to learn.
University of YouTube.
Yeah, University of YouTube. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just invaluable and pretty privileged to be in this kind of era where that opportunity is there.
Yeah. So what is going through this whole experience and what you've learned since you were 19, what's it taught you about money? Like I know you touched on the importance of having the business structure set up and organising the finances, which is something you would have done differently, but what else has it taught you about money?
I would say that money matters. Like my philosophy for so long was that money didn't, but having been in so many situations that I was in, it just does. Like you just need to know about money and know how it works and know where to get it and how to make it and how to use it effectively. But it's just it's a skill in itself that, especially in the creative scene, it's almost brushed aside. Like the philosophy, I guess, is that money doesn't matter because you're doing what you love.
Yeah. Which
is true, but that's only if you're making enough that you don't have to think about it. But when you're trying to start up, it's just your everyday reliance is on your cash flow.
Yeah.
And you can't continue to take photos if you're not making money.
Yeah. And how much has that changed from when you first started to now?
Oh, full 180, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first started, money was the last thing on my mind. I just wanted the experience and wanted to take photos. And I think that was the naivety that left me in positions where I was just didn't have any.
Yeah.
There was like literally didn't feel like there was any coming around the corner.
Yeah.
And that kind of dampens your enthusiasm and your optimism of like what you want to do and where you want to go, because it's at those moments when you realize that if you just had $1,000 or if you had been putting money aside into certain accounts every time you got paid, then you would just at least have enough to book a ticket home, for example. Not that we were in that dire straits, but you just really realize how valuable it is.
Yeah.
Especially from a business sense, like having enough to run a marketing campaign, for example, is just, it's exponential in the value that it provides. Like it's so short term to just look at it like, oh, this is like $500. That's like we're all flying to the next place at $500 if we're in Europe. But if you're looking at it long term, the exponential value that investing that $500 into a marketing campaign provides is just worth it 10 times over.
To wrap things up a bit, go back to the fulfillment piece, because I think that's a really interesting one. You had what I'd undoubtedly say majority of people in the world would say the dream life, the dream job, and you've said it yourself, like it was on the surface level, like you couldn't have asked for anything better. Traveling the world with your mates, getting paid, like living the absolute dream. What was that? What was missing? Like, why wasn't that your dream?
Yeah, there's no doubt that kind of job is the top 1%. Like that was just the most honourable position to be in. But when you're there, you either know that it's what you want or you don't. Because when you're living it every single day, you start to realise if it's making you tick or if it's not. And for me, after a while, I just realised that even though I had so many people around me that were saying it was their dream job and that they were living the dream, I could resonate with them on the level of like how lucky I felt to be in that position. But in terms of like how it made me feel when I went to sleep at night, I just wouldn't feel like it was everything that made me feel like I had lived my best life and lived my life, not everyone else's idea of what the best life is. And I think you said it perfectly with your phrase when you said living my dream, not what everyone else's dream is.
Yeah.
Because that is just hitting the nail on the head with exactly how it felt. Like my dream doesn't have to be the same as the next person just because we're in the top 1%.
Yeah.
And that's the same with anyone that's in any position. If it's not what you want out of life, then something needs to change regardless of how comfortable and how right things feel in terms of money and bills being paid and etc.
I think, that was the thing I was most excited about getting you on the podcast, because when we had the first of that conversation, it just resonates so much with what I see on my day-to-day. Like people come in and say, I want to buy a house. It's like, okay, great, awesome. Why? Oh, because the media said if I don't buy now, I'm going to miss out. Or my parents said I have to, or my friend just bought a house, so I want to. It's like, okay, but is that what you want? Like, is that what's going to fulfill you? Is that actually what you want to achieve? And when you get down to it, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And to hear that because you hear it so often that people say, well, the money, like everyone wants to get rich and famous, but they need to get there to realise that that's not the most important thing. And I think that kind of, it's along the same lines as we had this life, but it's important to find out what's important to you.
Oh, man. And I think that's almost the purpose of life, is to find out what's important to you.
Yeah.
Because it's almost just shoved down your throat of what's right, what's not, what's the dream job, what's not, what's living the life, what's not. But until you figure out what it is to you, then you're just always going to be misguided by those conceptions, because that is just what's forced upon you. And especially when you're being made to feel like that is what you should want, when it's not, it's just the most constrained feeling ever. Like, oh man, I can't describe it, and it must sound so ungrateful, but just not what made me feel right, you know? And all I wanted to do was just fulfill my potential as a human, and that avenue, regardless of how right it was for so many people, just wasn't the right path for me.
And I think you said it at the start, to figure that out on what you don't want to do with your life at such a young age would be such a big benefit, instead of waiting till you're 40, 45 years old, 50 years old and waking up going, oh shit, I'm not happy.
Yeah, man.
Whereas at least now you're 23, you're like, okay, I've experienced that, grateful what I experienced, but now I get to chase what I want.
Yeah, and I think I'd be if there's one takeaway that people listening could have, it'd be that if you are feeling the same way I did, regardless of what you're doing, you just got to get really practical with finding out what it is that you don't like. Because if you don't like what you're doing, and you don't know what it is you want to be doing, then you need to just start throwing the darts at the dartboard to find out what it is.
Go traveling for 4 years.
Just say yes to everything and find out.
Yeah. What other practical advice would you have for anyone that's maybe in that boat where they're a bit uneasy about where they are? Like, did you have any major steps or major realizations that kind of made it concrete for you that it wasn't what you wanted?
Yeah, just if I listened to a speech by Jim Carrey, probably about the same time I realised that it wasn't what I wanted, and he was talking about kind of the metaphor that I just used there with throwing darts at the dartboard, because I knew that what I was doing wasn't what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure what it was that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I kind of had to look at what it was, how I felt when I did other things in my life. And I realised the way that I felt when I was eating healthy, I was living a healthy life, and I was keeping super fit. The way that I felt when I did that, and the mindset that I was in, just felt like life was just natural, and I got excited at the thought of living a life where that was my everyday.
Yeah.
And that was when I realised that that's actually the direction that I wanted to be, and I wanted to be in that mindset and living that life every single day, and not have it as just 20 minutes where I'm go for a run and then I have a juice. I want it to be every day I'm just living and breathing that lifestyle, and comparing that to how I felt when I was going out and working, taking photos of travel. The feeling that I got in compared was just so unbalanced, and that was when I needed to make the change. So I guess the people that are listening, that would be the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, just a bit more self-awareness, looking to see what actually makes you tick.
And I think a lot of people have the same feeling. What is it that you like to do in your free time? Why is it that you like to do that?
Yeah.
And then kind of being creative with how you can make money and make that your life is almost the funnest part, and that's where the business part comes in. Yeah. Which is kind of another passion that I just love, creative strategy.
Yeah. So what does it look like now? What's the next steps for you? And
so I'm in a bit of an interesting transition phase now where everything that I've done has been geared towards travel, destination photography and campaigns. And now I want to kind of portray a more accurate representation of me. But to do that, I need to be living that life, which I'm in transition of now, getting to a point where I'm super healthy and that is my everyday. So I'm just training full-time for triathlon and trying to get into some race condition physically, and then going to try and make that my life somehow.
Yeah. So what does that look like at the moment? Just waking up every morning, training,
I think
sleep, repeat.
Yeah. But I still need to leverage the position that I'm in. At the moment, photography is that kind of photography is my cash flow.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain period now where I need to leverage my skills there while I'm getting my skills in the area that I want to do full-time up to scratch, where I can then transition and use all my time and energy into that. So while I'm like eat, sleep, train, repeat, I still need to shoot campaigns on the side.
Yeah.
But kind of phasing it out in terms of using the content purely for brands and not using it for the awareness that I would provide normally where I post it on my social media.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting position to be in.
Yeah, it is, man. But I also just love the podcasting, just creating an environment where we can sit down and have meaningful conversations with young people like this is just one of my favourite things too. So just trying to put some time and effort into doing that more often as well, because these are the times when you just sit down and have a conversation. We've spoken about it before, where it's not just like, oh, hey, how you going, man? Oh, the weather's pretty bad. Yeah, same. Oh, yeah, all right, catch you later.
Yeah.
Where it's deep and it's meaningful and sharing it so that other people can kind of tune in. I think that's just one of the most valuable skills and, I guess, times of the day and my life that I love. Yeah.
Well, I think, as you said before, for me, just showing people what else is out there, like your story, like you've got X amount of followers on Instagram, so obviously a lot of people know who you are, but there's still a lot of people who don't even think that what you've done or what you've achieved and what you've been through is even possible. Like they just maybe heard it from a friend and like, no chance. Like that life's not possible. And that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to start doing, like, as obviously why I started the podcast, was just to show people what else is out there and say, like, look at this person. This is how they live their life. This is the ups and downs. It's not all glamorous. Like this is what this person does for work. Like, and just trying to open people's awareness of what else is out in the world, because it's so easy to get stuck in your 9 to 5, stuck in your box, and just not open your awareness.
Yeah, so cool, man. Props to you.
Thanks,
I'm glad we crossed paths.
Yeah, definitely. So where can people go to find out more about you and your adventures?
I love just the idea of conversation. So if people hear this and they want to have a chat, then just send me a message on Instagram. It's at Tiger Lyons with a Y, forward line Tiger and Lyons, TYGERLYONS. So maybe say hi there, or swing me an email if you're feeling a little more a fish.
Yeah.
That's hi@tigerlyons.com.
Excellent. And you're across most social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah. I'm a bit, late to the party on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's not really natural for me to check it, but
Excellent.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks for being on. Appreciate it.
Stoked.
If you've enjoyed this episode of More Than Money, make sure that you subscribe to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes. And feel free to like, comment, and share with a friend.